Connections. One of the best things we can do is kind of keep our mics on mute if we're not talking, just in case there's background noise, so that we don't, bug other people when they're trying to get some thoughts out. So it could be respectful of our mute buttons. That would be helpful. So welcome to Orion Growth in OC, powered by Verbella. Dave, our moderator, my co-conspirator, and I are certainly happy to have you here today. John Ramser is here from Orion Growth at the table somewhere. He's our camera, so we'll be recording this and posting to YouTube when we're done, the camera lens perspective and the human behind it. So thanks to everybody for making that happen. Somewhere in here, Sarah, our VIP community for Open Campus. Her team works tirelessly to get everybody accommodated with avatars and tech issues and general wayfinding. We couldn't do it without her. So we appreciate everything you and Mike and the team at Actajos and Open Campus do for us. So with that, let's go ahead and welcome our guests, Sophie and LA. Is a future work strategist or a work futurist and strategist, keynote speaker, author, and workforce innovation specialist at Future Work Consultancy Flexcell Network. Over 560,000 people have taken her LinkedIn course on empathy, Gen Z, future of work skills in multiple languages. Sophie's co-creative executive strategy sessions and transformative workshops help leaders and managers adapt to modern work to attract, engage, and retain a multi-generational distributed workforce. Sophie's latest book, Empathy Works, The Key to Competitive Advantage in the New Era of Work, from May of 2022. And she also hosts the popular podcast, Transforming Work with Sophie Wade. Well, Sophie, we want to welcome you. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Bet. And we've got Lorraine LA. LA is the president of Glasford Group, a boutique leadership advisory championing women, and founder of Unlocking Her, leadership retreats for women in Costa Rica. Her career spans 4 decades across many industries, including global fashion, telecommunication, food and beverage, and most recently as VP of a global multi-billion-dollar real investment and development organization. A trusted advisor to business and coach to women in corporate, LA speaks about gendered ageism, women in the corporate world, and her experience in New York City on 9/11. Her energy, her lifetime of stories, and her passion for championing women is infectious. Welcome, LA.
Welcome, LA.
So with
Thanks,
that,
everyone.
I'd like to give it to Dave and start with our monologue, and we'll jump right in. Thanks for coming, guys.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. And Sophie, it's so cool to have both of you here, having built a relationship with both of you digitally. This is actually the first time I'm speaking to LA, period, hearing her voice live, but then her great videos online. And I think that's so cool, so representative of the change. It's one of a few times that this has happened already. All right, I'm going to kick us off. This one's a little bit abstract, so work with me here. I'm going to get to a point, is all I'll say up front. All right, so COVID's been utterly bizarre. We all know this, of course, but let me give you a more imaginative version. To me, it's like the whole world got into the same car. We all got into a massive accident. Some of us sadly died, but the majority of us ended up in the emergency ward, becoming stable and remaining there in this sort of purgatory safe house. It's like we all got suspended in space, all while having this sensation of being held like a child who had the good fortune of a safe home. And I get that this is a bizarre analogy, but I'm getting somewhere. At least I'm hoping that I'm going to get the reaction from you by the end of this, that you feel I'm partly somewhere. So in the beginning of all of this COVID shit, everything slowed down a lot. I think we could probably all remember that we really, truly work together. And in the world of work, because that's sort of what we're here to broadly discuss, we witnessed higher degrees of empathy than we've ever seen. We witnessed faster operational transformations than we could have ever imagined. To give you an example, large institutional banks, the slowest moving cruise ships of the time, migrated more of their business operations and practices to the cloud than anyone would have thought possible. They did what should have taken more than a decade in a matter of weeks. Truly, truly astounding how fast and how fierce the change was. Shifts in culture were really more profound than the operational shift. All of a sudden, it was normal to not wear a suit and tie across all industries, or frankly, just to wear what made you feel good. It became normal for a child to interrupt an important business meeting, and I'm channeling my air quotes, because what's more important than our kids? It became normal to explore the future of our industries on social media, to hug each other through a screen. You know, as I wrote this yesterday, I got chills, but the chills sort of felt masked. They felt masked by something foreign, because there's this eerie feeling that we're losing integral parts of what we gained. So what started to happen? Me, when I look back on it, I'm going to call them the corporate watchdogs. The corporate watchdogs were laying in the weeds, and they started to begin to pounce. As soon as the health and safety restrictions started to wax and wane, these watchdogs would lean in during a waxing phase and pump the back to normal rhetoric. Perhaps at present has manifested into what I feel like it's the most grotesque form. People are calling it work from work now. Feels like one of the most exclusionary things you could ever say. So anyway, where are we going with these random thoughts? What are we here to talk about today? Here to talk about deepening intergenerational connections at work. And I think framing around the COVID experience is very important. Whether or not we're experiencing a reversion to the mean, COVID changed everything for the majority of people across all generations in the workplace. Our youngest cohorts either had a short-lived office experience or never even entered the workforce in the same way as their predecessors altogether. Not to mention that they have this strange feeling and need to look at the world differently, because those after them and themselves are going to experience one of the most transformational technological shifts in any recent memory, coupled with having to steer the sort of industrial, post-industrial ship away from a proverbial iceberg. Then we've had cohorts in the middle, had the sort of real before and after moment, this powerful desire to not let the next 20 to 30 years of their career perhaps look like the first 10. And then we've had the more seasoned generations workforce who either truly started to channel their deep wisdom and understanding and gave it to this task at hand, or some of them, not many of them, but perhaps some of the more powerful ones, dug in with this insecure arrogance, almost like a silverback gorilla trying not to get dethroned. So the future seems to have been pulled forward, no matter how we look at it, and no matter what it looks like on the surface. But like as we're boarding this spaceship without really knowing whether or not we have a final destination, really no way of recognizing our surroundings anymore. So all we can really do is work together across all generations of the workplace to try to figure it out. And we really, really do have to figure it out. So I'm hoping that we can spend the next hour attempting to meaningfully progress. Eventually, we'll have to get lifted out of this spaceship that we're on. We'll have to touch down on a new planet. And I think it's this great opportunity to create new social contracts, new ways of doing things, and we can do it truly together from a new vantage point. So as I transition, I just want to say I couldn't be happier to have two very badass, very wise women help us navigate this conversation. People that I've had the good fortune of getting to know digitally because of us all getting into this car crash together. Sophie and Lorraine, once again, welcome. For our first question, it's a simple one. Before I ask it, I want to say I'm going to start with Lorraine. I just really want to ask you, how has my introduction made you feel? What would you add? What would you subtract? What would you throw away? Before you answer, please don't go to the solutions, because we're going to get there. I just want you to paint a picture of the nuance of this moment for our intergenerational workforce from your perspective.
Well, first of all, you just captured so much in what you just said. And, I just started writing furiously because the first thing you said, which I just wanted to comment on, was this whole safe space that, we all of a sudden we were working from home. It was a different space we were in. I think that in itself had an impact on what we're going to talk about today. You also talked about, the cultural shifts. I think one thing that I would add is that while we were all back in our homes or in our safe spaces, there was also a cultural shift going on with social justice in the world. And that really impacted and became apparent for everyone as they were out of the office. And then the other two things that you mentioned, I think we should dive into too, are the technology shifts that happened before during, and then after, and what our responsibilities are with the different generations regarding tech. So
I love that, Lorianne. Before I pass to Sophie, I'd love to get you to share a little bit more of your perspective from the industry time in before branching off on your own. Like having gone through the career trajectory that you did, and knowing you as someone who's been so outspoken about the change, particularly from the vantage point of women. Is there anything else that you could do to get us a little deeper on, like what you feel the nuance of what we went through and perhaps like where we are now, either good or bad? Like, are we reverting? You feel really hopeful and optimistic about this moment in 2023? Like, I'd love if you could give me a little bit more from your career journey perspective.
Sure. And, while my journey was, a bit windy, I ended up with a global real estate and development company and as an executive. And, that's where you and I really, joined forces that's where we met online. I posted something, you posted something about the future of work. We both did articles on it. And I think what's important, again, this is my lived experience and my perspective as a 60-year-old woman who has had 4 decades plus of leadership experience. And in the commercial real estate specifically, which is what we're talking about, they're just, the fact remains that offices themselves were never designed or meant for women. And so this latest, I just saw an article the other day, it was an article that took 4 different heads of global commercial real estate executives, CEO level, that said, what's happening with the future of office? And they were all white, all male, all saying office is where it's at. And it felt very tone deaf to me, specifically where you said, but we brought in more food tables and we've brought in more, lunch and learns, and we've brought in more. It was just tone deaf. And so my lived experience is as a, albeit white privileged woman, but in the real estate realm, sitting at the table often as an only. And I think that the young women that are coming into this realm and really want to carve out a career in this space need somewhere where they can be seen as a contributor, that can be valued for what they bring to the table. And they need older women to show them that it's possible. I don't want to get into too much of a tirade, but I think there's a whole audience of senior women who got to where they are and then thought, I'm where I need to be. I had to work hard for it. Now you have to work hard. And that's just the opposite of what needs to happen. We need to reach back and take these young women who are really keen about working hard and getting up to the top. And whether it's, well, I had to go through the shitty climb and put up with the shittiness, and so do you. I think that is just so wrong. And the intergenerational opportunity with networking and reverse networking is off the charts important.
Excellent way to close out your opening segment. Thank you for that. Sophie, I know you're going to say some good shit. So do you want me to prompt you in any way, or are you just ready to go? You're on mute too. Just let's go. There you go.
So you're just going to give me the same question?
Well,
isn't that cheating?
I'm ready for you to go wherever you want. I mean, I just really want you to set the stage, how you're seeing this right now, sort of like quasi post-COVID, for our intergenerational opportunity at work, whatever way you see fit.
Hey, lot going on. So, right. Well, a lot of the trends that we are experiencing now were pre-COVID. There was a lot of acceleration because of COVID, because of all these technology implementations and communications tools and applications and platforms. And that really changed the dynamics of, or sort of pushed us much further along the trajectory, and didn't allow us time to adapt and to really take on board all these different changes. And so what I've seen, what we see now, unfortunately, is the original, or not the original, the earlier, sort of 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when we had millennials being the ones who were being maligned and complained about, it's now got down to, it's now to the Gen Z, or the group, the younger group of professionals who are coming into the workplace, because really I see it as being very much a reaction against where we're going, what all these incredible changes that technology is causing, and which we spent billions on investing in, and all the intended consequences we wanted more mobility. We wanted to be able to be, on the road and continuing our businesses, processes, and be in contact, and yet we didn't think of all the other intended consequences, which then happened, which we saw starkly in terms of the great opportunities as well as the challenges. And so many people, particularly in the US, had epiphanies. There was an article back in, I think, 2020, which said people were epiphany quitting, and they were kind of going, oh my goodness, I can live my life differently, amazing. And then changing how they're doing, therefore the great resignation. People were really thinking, I can do this differently, I can live my life differently, and I can look at work differently. And if you've had less experience in the workplace, the pandemic became, as you pointed out, Dave, the bulk of your experience. Is like that was most of your lived working experience. I used to be a member of I worked hard and so should you. Yes, I still in this shit. Yes, there's so much that we're needing to be thinking about, and how we can live differently. I mean, I have lived all over the world. I've worked in Hong Kong and Germany and France and England and here for a long time. And it's so different. Like in Germany, people get to the office at 9 a.m. and they quit they leave the office at 5 p.m. period. And so I've never had an established view of what work is. And so the epiphanies that people had when things were changing so much, when they were able to see, well, I don't necessarily want to be stuck at home all the time, but I don't want to be stuck in the office. Oh my goodness, I can set things up differently. And of course, if you're one of the younger people, I guess not having these labels, but one of the younger group, and you have very little experience of working and being sort of confined to a box, then when you are given the opportunity to work in different ways, aren't you going to say, hang on a second, let me just use all these tools in the way that makes most sense? So the way I look at I look to the youngest generation, the youngest workers, because they have the least experience and they're looking at working with the freshest eyes, that they actually are helping us understand what the future of work really looks like, because they are doing it and they're just coming in and they're not trying to, I'm always saying, like, they're not in some corner of TikTok trying to disrupt the world. Just coming out and kind of going, hey, how should I be working? Okay, let's just try it out. And unfortunately, it becomes a lot of conflict. And I guess one thing that has surprised me is I knew that there were going to be issues, because hybrid is harder, and certainly flexible hybrid, which I believe fundamentally should be the where we're going, for business sense, not to do with anybody's needs or wants, but makes sense for business, and it is completely aligned with the fact that we're all individuals and we all work differently. So I guess I did aligned, but it really the continued this sort of power dynamic, that it's kind of like, oh, employees have more power, or employers should have the power. So I think there are a lot of negative dynamics, but I do understand, I do empathize, and Dave, you know how much I work on empathy, because it's a really, really challenging, changing world, and try and have something be a little bit more how it was and stable and consistent. Understand that's absolutely not where we're going, and it's not going to be helpful for how we're going to get there. That's, we need to be adapting in so many ways and really changing how we're working. And I kind of stopped there for a second because
that was great, Sophie. And I think you set the table really well there. And I kind of want to transition to our second question. And in doing so, I actually want to share an anecdote about Sophie and I's relationship that came to me. Sophie, you've become both a friend and a mentor to me. And I'm going through lots of change in my life right now. And I have this memory of walking near my house, talking to you about what I should do with the future of my career. And to me, it brings up, and I'm actually going to go to LA for this question first, even though I'm sharing something about Sophie and I, but to me, it brings up this whole important idea of digital inclusivity. And I think that LinkedIn has done a great job of this. For any of its dark sides, I think it's done a great job of this. Because what I think happens on LinkedIn is that, I'm going to use the word power, but I want to use it in a good way. Power resides with those that share their data, their insights, and context with their audience on their terms. It's like, and I just ask myself, like, shouldn't this dynamic exist within a company or team? On-demand access to essential information and leadership so that people can innovate and stay ahead. The only way to do this is through digital inclusion. So I want to talk about how we change the way that our generations interact with each other, but more notably, even just more broadly, how do we actually change the way we transfer knowledge to each other? A world where it's clearly more digital than it is physical. How do we change it? So LA, I don't know if you have any thoughts. Like you're spending so much time online, and you're also connecting with people in really interesting and unconventional ways and places, far different than the first chapters of your career. So like, how do you take some of what you know about what you've done online and what you're doing differently in advice to larger organizations?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's work. I'm just going to put that shit out there. It is work. It's intentional work that I'm doing. It was not an area of comfort for me. Like many, I happened to be with that global commercial real estate organization when COVID hit, and working from home with a team, across countries. And, I'd never heard of Teams before. I'm not tech savvy. And yet here I am, 2.5 years later, and I'm sitting in the metaverse with an avatar, having a conversation with multiple generations and races and religions and backgrounds and sexual preferences around a table that we created. And for me, it's getting out of your damn comfort zone. And I know that sounds cliche, and everyone's talking about, shift your mindset and get uncomfortable. But the fact remains is, the older generation has a bias to the younger generation that they just don't get it, and they don't work hard enough, or they're just interested in too much in flexibility and they got to show up. And yet the younger generation is looking at us and going, hey, just a second. Just because I don't have the experience that you do doesn't mean I don't have something that I can teach you. And both sides need to come to the table. And so to your question on what I've been doing in the last, short time period is, reaching out on every Meet app I can. You want to talk? Okay, so let's either Google Meet or WhatsApp or FaceTime or Metaverse or whatever it is. And for me, I'm just learning to navigate those apps, how to download them, and so on and so forth. So for me, you Google right now, intergenerational relationships, what you start to see is things like how to talk to your elder, how to talk to your grandparents. And it's very based on a familial sense. The fact that you've brought us here together to talk about that in the workplace, I think centers on two things for me. We need to look at mentorship, and we need to look at reverse mentorship. Because to me, the focus is sometimes too much just on mentoring and not the reverse. And there's got to be this, respect and open two-way conversation that needs to happen. I've benefited from it in a huge way.
I love it. And funny what you say, LA, about just getting yourself outside of your comfort zone. I'm actually thinking of something Chris Early said to me, who has now ventured from upstairs to downstairs. I'm looking at him right now. It's really weird, metaverse and real life, in person, I should say. But he was mentioning to me the other day that like often the sort of design solutions that we in an office environment are a lot more complicated than they need to be. And the truth is just like 3 people sitting in a couple chairs in close proximity to one another can usually ideate enough on what they need to, irrespective of how awesome the amenities are or how thoughtful the design of the space is. And I think that you're embodying that exact same thing with just getting in and using tools that are available and meeting where they are at. So I love that. Sophie, I'm going to turn it to you. Like, I want, if you want to provide, you've got lots of data and insights in your background and perspective. Or I'm just trying to get to some of the hows, like of how we change things here. And I think even if we remove this whole intergenerational thing from how we talk about it, I think really just talking about it in general, we're all there. So I don't know what you think.
Sure. Yes, look, I have 2 courses which have Gen Z in the name, but really always caveat that we're all individuals first. We all have different experiences. There's a lot of research about peer profiles, as they're called. But I, as I actually mentioned in the chat, the 2 things that I really do look at, which helps give us some groupings, are how early where the people are in their life arc. I don't even like to talk about careers now because we can have so many careers, but people think about their careers being like the whole length of their life. So it's sort of, are you in your early years? How much experience do you have? Are so the prime revenue generating years, very more seasoned, the word that came up earlier, or are you sort of starting to look to be phasing sort of out of the corporate workforce, and looking for different models, although different configurations of employment arrangements are very common in the early years as well. So yes, labels are not necessarily helpful. And the other thing, as well as where people are in their career arc in terms of how they're looking at it and what experience they have, and what understanding they have, based on my context. If I'm Gen X, when I came into the workplace, I did this, I did that, I experienced this. Therefore, do I actually see how somebody else who's very new in the workplace is experiencing it when so much has changed? And the reason that I talk a lot about empathy is because I originally, when there was all these complaints about, quote, millennials, as there was so much conflict and aggro that I really put myself read tons of research and then put myself in their shoes as them, and said, well, how are they experiencing the world? What does it mean? What are the changes? And it really, and that was why I started talking about empathy, because I think that is, and I use that because I think is the solution, and I find that to be the solution. And empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding their perspectives and connecting with their experience, feeling what they're feeling, understand what they're going through. And the world for young people younger than Gen X, for example, is very different in many ways because of technologies. If you've grown up with an iPhone in your hands, which is sort of the younger people, people who started having them as they're coming to the workforce in 2009 when the iPhone was opened up. Very different experience in terms of how much knowledge you have and how you interact with people, because you've had so much more agency, so much more information. It really changes how you see the world, and the world is flatter, right? In the past, power was information was power. So the power pyramid, like the people on the top had all the power because they had all the information. Now it's so different, and so the people, is much flatter, which gets to the younger people want to contribute, they want to share what they have, and bi-directional mentoring, or as LA, as you were saying, you were talking about reverse mentoring, but bi-directional, I think there's a huge amount that can be shared on both ways. Particularly now as we get even more into this AI, where young people are I think 70% of millennials and Gen Zs have used it, and that's the sort of the reverse for older generations. So I think there's a lot can be shared and across generations these days. And I see that in putting yourself in other people's shoes and understanding their context. That's when we can bring all the experiences and expertise and savvy and, you know, younger people who have just come to the workplace, they've had tons more time just to play with technology. Like, I don't play with it. I don't have time. I'm going to like, okay, give me a new idea, give me a new app. This is functioning. I'm going to use it. And so if we can all be working together to bring all the different contributions that we have and be listening to each other, using that empathy to listen to each other and question, do I understand what you mean? I just saw this recently, which was apparently, so out of pocket to Gen Xers certainly and boomers is that, you know, you're not available. Whereas to a Gen Z, I just found out, or a younger person in the workforce, it means you're sort of acting chaotically and you're kind of like out of control. I think that's what I remember saying. So if somebody says, if a Gen X says if I said I was out of pocket, somebody young is going to think I'm hilarious. Like, what on earth is she talking about? There are lots of different ways that we can be misunderstanding each other because we're not realizing the extent to which our contexts have changed. And so really listening and asking questions and saying, is that, this is what I heard? Is that what you meant? And because the background I bring of having, a Brit and I'm British and an American, I've lived all over the world, I interpret what I assume could be dangerous if I'm then making decisions based on those judgments rather than really trying to understand what the other person, whatever their context. And as you're saying, LA, it can be, female, male, gender, race, whatever context someone is bringing, the more that we can lean into that and be really thoughtful about, asking questions and understanding a lot more about the other person's experience and what they're really trying to say and what they mean, the better off we'll all be.
Love it. And you're making me think of a few things. Like, as much as we want separation between our work and our life, I think we're not really moving necessarily in that direction of division between the two. Right. And some people get very triggered when they hear like, bring your whole self to work. But like, if you really just think of it without putting any negative slant on it, I think it's simply to say that like, we want to be ourselves regardless of, where we're showing up. What the fuck is wrong?
Can we agree, Dave? I completely agree with the concept of bringing your whole self to work. We also have to acknowledge that we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm with you. I think that's sort of like what I'm hearing from you guys actually about like the how of doing this, really learning more so how to be empathetic, because we're moving away from working a production with a specific output and more into like conceptual thinking and ideating. So the whole framework of at least the knowledge sector of our economy is weak, and it's causing us to actually have to interact with each other in ways that we don't really understand. Let me transition. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to add one thing is, frequently we are used to connecting, whether it's intergenerational, we're used to connect, not collaborate. We're used to connecting common interests, right? I mean, that is the number one easiest way, whether you're at an event, private event, public event, in an interview, whatever it is, it's an interest. What are those shared interests? And then you start a conversation. And, I also think when you're talking about multi-generational, you're also talking about, and I don't want to sidebar this, but I think it's important to put it out there. We're fighting age biases, period. We are fighting generational age biases that, that's just what we think. That's what we've been brought up to think, that 50 is old or 70 is old, or they, they're put out to pasture, to those old sayings. And so for me, we have to be able to focus on the common interests, which means diversity actually comes into it, because we can't just assume that there's no common interest between a 25-year-old and a 60-year-old. We just can't make those assumptions anymore. And so I think it's important that organizations check their own biases and assumptions when they are creating things like event. Anyway.
I just wrote in the chat. I'm so glad you jumped in because that's so key. So thank you. Okay, I want to get us to Q&A, so I'm going to try and close us out in the formal part of this section. But something came to me this morning. So my wife and I just dropped our daughter at the bus, which is very close to where we live, and then we went and took the dog for a walk. And another grouping of kids came for a later bus pickup. And a girl, probably, I don't know, 14, 15, on her phone. I don't know what she was doing on her phone, but my wife and I remarked to each other that when we were young, we didn't have a smartphone to do these kinds of things. Then I looked at her and I said, when Elle is standing at that bus stop, she is literally going to be in mixed reality. She may have a headset on her that is so slick that is, she's experiencing holographic images as well as her in real life surroundings. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. So, I was sort of being a little bit poetic or whatever with this, get onto a spaceship. Like, I really do think we're moving to a new planet here. Like, this is one of the most transformational periods in any recent human memory. And perhaps we all feel that way about every era we've ever lived in. But I do know that the speed of information is just off the charts, and it just continues to get faster and faster. So we're moving to this new planet. I really just want you guys to get philosophical with me for a second. Like, how do we start to lay the foundations for not just sustaining life, but really establishing better social contracts? Like, if we just got existential for a minute and pretended that we could just get that the past of work happened and we were just going to build the future, like, what kind of future are you guys imagining? I'll start with Sophie. Like, what future should?
So I'm very positive about where we're going and what the future looks like. If we're talking further out, we have much more of a network. We have all kinds of different relationships with work. We have different, multiple different revenue streams. We, sometimes we're working part-time or full-time, and lots of different clients and projects and freelancers. We have all different combinations based on what our needs are, who we are, what our relationships are, where we live, who we want to be, how we want to be traveling and working. So I do see an environment where we are able to have so much more freedom and possibilities, and we are truly empowered in many, many different ways. I think there's quite a long way to get there, and one of the key things during this period of transformation, of extraordinary change, when we're talking about upskilling and AI and all these incredible changes, like the next 20 years are going to be pretty challenging. And so in that 20 years, I do see, incredible need for, strong connective cultures, a lot of focus on relationships, and that being a key piece of, work time is spent ensuring people develop strong relationships, and have strong cultures that can connect people wherever they're working around the world, and be really leaning into and connecting across all our different contexts. So I do see it being much more individualized, much more balanced or rebalanced social contract, that as really enables both the corporation to be sort of served, and going through a tumultuous time as we're trying to each company is trying to work out, who its customers are and going to be, and how they're going to serve them, and what the products are they're going to need. And simultaneously, I sort of talk about the customer journey and the employee journey. Like, these two things are, and I depict them in a kind of a yin yang, because they are part and parcel of the same thing. And so I'm very positive about where we're going. I think it's going to be a rocky road, but I think we have the essence, we have the understanding of some of the key elements in there, and it's very powerful.
Thank you, Sophie. LA, I'd love for you to try to close us out with some oomph, but maybe a minute or two, so that we can jump into the Q&A, because the chat has been very.
No, absolutely. I just have to remark, Steve and Kirk, You said, given time and freedom to understand, we may see 60-year-olds wondering about Taylor Swift and a 25-year-old wondering what grunge was. They can educate each other, listen to music during their times. First of all, that was like brilliantly stated. I happen to be 60. I happen to be both a fan of football and Taylor Swift. And you know, my whole family, it has lots of diverse ages. My husband is 12 years younger than I am. I have an 18-year-old, a 24-year-old. They keep me young. I think really, Dave, to close it out is, you know, and again, I'm speaking from my lived perspective and my lived experience. That's all I have. And for me, I think that, you know, the seasoned individuals need to be a little more open, that the younger generation has an incredible amount to teach us. I think a lot of times the focus is on, you know, just, you know, that we have to get the older generation teaches the young and, you know, it flows downhill. And I actually think it's the opposite. And I think that the young sometimes need to also, the younger people or entrants into the workforce that haven't been to the hasn't worked for say 20, 30, 40 years, also understand that, you know, just because the person looks like they don't understand, you just can't go down that road. And sometimes that's a lot of it. So I think, you know, what do I see the future? I imagine a future where it's not just intergenerational conversations, it's intergenerational living, it's through intergenerational working, it's true intergenerational communities, so that we're not as siloed as we sometimes are. So I'm very positive, and I'm just committed to getting outside my comfort zone on this third act, and I'm just gonna see what happens.
Awesome. LA, hopefully I'm 76, you're 100, and we're in some absolutely wild immersive environment then talking about this.
My avatar will look a lot different.
Hey, you can look whatever you want, man. In this
True.
Wants to be missed. She wants to be missed, man. So. I'm going to pass it over to Chris. Thank you guys so much. That was epic.
It's funny how you can not get through an hour conversation without talk of Taylor Swift, right? I mean, what an amazing weekend she had. I don't know what all of you did, but she crushed it for sure. My daughter went past weekend, and what an amazing experience that was. So Dave, you know, one thing that came up during that conversation that I was thinking about is you and I are intergenerational. You know, I'm the old crusty guy, right?
You are fucking crusty.
But old and crusty. But I think that we've definitely found a way to be concerned collectively for the future at work. And that's part of what we're doing here, you know, in the metaverse, in a strange place, exploring and being curious and bringing people in and odd, quote unquote, odd conversations or uncomfortable conversations about how we're going to get to the next. I think that's been the whole purpose from the beginning of what we've been doing here, this massive experiment of inspire people, inspire places. So to everyone who continues to support these conversations, I just personally want to say thank you, because I think that's the beginning of fixing these things, is recognizing A, that things are broken, and B, maybe not giving a shit so much about what others think. Moving forward with a heartfelt and meaningful discussion. So yeah, thanks for that. So let's open it up to Q&A. I'm sure there's some comments out there. If anybody wants to start,
I'm singling out the guy that I can look at right now, Kelly. He's going to start us off.
Awesome.
I was just going to flow on there, Chris, and what you were saying, and I was brainstorming something this morning, and I started talking about one of my favorite red quotes returning to the office, where people talk about osmosis. Office thing, and the idea of osmosis, I think, is more about enforcing the herd mentality rather than true osmosis. We could do with osmosis between generations, and that comes about through experimenting and trying and approaching, as a lot of the speakers said earlier, using different tools, different forums. There are huge things, huge benefits, and huge learnings from between the generations in different directions. And a lot of that also comes not partly, as we said earlier, or someone said earlier, from having that open mindset, about who you engage with and what you might learn from them. But also I think how you go about them, because again, where a lot of this this corporate culture falls down, I think, and they overthink and overstructure, a lot of the benefits come from, I was speaking to Tracy Borison recently, who's another person online who's very good at open and scheduling conversations with people she doesn't know. And we were talking about the benefit of random conversations. So you have conversations where you have some interest, but without a particular agenda. Some of the most beneficial learnings can come out of those discussions, and I think that's sometimes where we can move forward the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to pick up on that? Well said. I think that's part of our meetings in here, right, is to try to have avatar to avatar interactions. And I think one of the other things that we've learned along the way, this is what, season 4 or season 2, episode 4. So this is the 14th-ish time we've done this, and what we found is that we can get to the heart of the conversation pretty quickly. Whereas in person it might take a little bit, or there might be more trust that needs to be established, or what have you, psychologically, to get to that point where there's comfort or a level of comfort. But avatar to avatar in here, we're feeling like people are paying more attention, and that there's just a sort of a deeper connection.
Colin's
Well,
uncharacteristically quiet.
Well,
Go for it.
just a thought on that. Sorry, this is Carrie. It strikes me that's kind of the positive flip on hiding behind your keyboard, right? So online, there's it's so easy for people to be mean, and I filter this through the lens of a parent who had a teenager during the pandemic. So it was, a deep dive into the dangers of the technology. But I kind of like what you said, whereas avatar to avatar, you just kind of start talking, because I don't know any of you, but it's been a perfectly lovely, except for LA, I know LA. But it's kind of just struck me what you just said, is that bringing these meetings to these people together in this metaverse, it takes away the ageism. You could actually take away the sexism as well if you wanted to. Ability, discomfort, just right. We could all just be kind of neutrally agendered avatars, right? And so I find that really fascinating, because it flips the script on the hiding behind your keyboard, in that it creates a safe space, I guess, to have difficult conversations. So I don't know that there's more to say about that, but just wanted to kind of put that out in the universe.
Thank you for putting that out there.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, because I think that's sort of one of the,
thanks,
I guess, sort of unintended consequences of these conversations, right? Is that we learn from each one of them. And I think the avatar to avatar connection, online connections, it started with, you can't have meaningful relationships without being in person, right? That was the sort of narrative at the time. And that's where Dave and I set out. Dave and I didn't know each other for how long was it before we met? And like you and Chris early right now, doing the same thing you and I did 2 years, 2 years or something.
Chris Moeller came here literally last February. I had never met him in person. And Chris Early, same thing, hadn't met him in person. People might think this is weird, but it's not. And it's also not weird to have an avatar to avatar conversation.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And when I met Dave, I knew Dave, so we had never met, but I was sleeping in the basement, or in the guest bedroom, I don't know, 6-8 hours after I got there. So it's like, you can have meaningful relationships. You can get to know somebody online for sure, and I think it makes the real life interaction with that person maybe even that much more meaningful or exciting to have. So that's been one of the huge benefits post-COVID, I think, is expanding our networks, expanding our relationships virtually first, and really sort of weeding out the people that maybe are not good positive energy, or maybe are not going to contribute positively to what the purpose or the direction or the mission is. And that's okay too. So
I couldn't agree with you more, Chris. I think
Yeah.
that right. I look around at this table. I don't know if I can move my cursor again. I look around at this table. There I go. I'm looking around. I look around at everybody and I'm like, I want to have private conversations with so many of you. And to your point, it doesn't have to. I've never met you. I've never met Dave.
Mhm.
Like outside his video, I don't know the sound of anyone's voice. So,
Mhm.
but our posts, our content, and our conversations shared publicly resonated. And even when they don't, and we have difficult conversations to have, which was my post this morning, the difficult conversations, if we can just learn to have them in a respectful, open manner, then it's a gift. It's a gift, and it's a gift that what you guys have created here with Inspired Places.
Yeah. Thank you. It provided us, it was provided to us. We had a thought about what could potentially be coming out of it. And, as we continue to go, Dave likes to say we're just a couple of guys in the woods rubbing sticks together, trying to figure out what this is. But I think every time we have another one of these discussions, figure it out a little bit more. And it's another mode. It's another modality, another opportunity to come together in a different way. And what's wrong with coming together? I think it's the opposite of bifurcation that's coming together. So I think it's important that we explore all of those. And kudos to everybody that does get past that challenge of whatever it is, the new technology, the new app, having to read the terms of service and plow through that just to experience something different generationally. So
isn't it ironic, Chris, as well, then people are obsessing about what we're not losing if we don't go back to how we used to work pre-pandemic, that they're losing sight of what we'll really miss out on.
Absolutely. There for years you can go to an office and never have a meaningful conversation with colleagues. You
Exactly.
might happen into this conversation and in an hour you've had a meaningful conversation with 20 people you maybe never met. So the question just becomes, where's our bias at that point?
And I'd also say that some of our terminology, I mean, I know this is phrased in real life, but I think real and virtual are going to feel like old terms, because what's not real about developing a relationship in whether it's here or just on a Zoom chat, that's virtual, but the conversations are real and the interactions are real. So those words become like, in real life, it's kind of like, well, a real conversation is had here. A real conversation is had in so many different spaces. So I think a lot of our terminology needs to evolve, I think, and it matters because we've seen how many problems the terminology can create, including those labels. So I just want to put that out there. Oh, physically proximate. Yes, that's good. Oh, in the flesh. Ooh.
I'm curious about something.
Sure.
Because I'm listening to you and I'm watching the chat at the same time, and there's some just great things that are I'm seeing an intersection. And I have a question at the end of this, because all that we're talking about is that, in my opinion, the machines that we're a part of they're traumatizing. They have traumatized us for our decades on this earth. It's legacies of trauma through the machines that are evolving. We're in a hopefully paradigm shift. But what I'm hearing as well is the opportunity of decentralization. The irony of being here, my personal belief is that we need to get holistic and remember embodiment at the same time. So we're body, mind, spirit all the time. We're all trying to get back to agency outside of these machines while being of service. How early do we start? When can we turn off the lights in a normal classroom in education and keep the work of play throughout our lifetimes? Because play on the playground is where we come up and start those conversations. We didn't have to introduce ourselves. So I'm just curious, can we and how we get back to play? And I saw people talking about fun over there, and that can be a bridge. So I'm real curious about that.
Yeah,
So-
I love this idea. Oh, sorry, Sophie. Go ahead.
Thank you. And then, Karen, I definitely want to hear what you have to say. So, Dr. Pirate, I would say that play is in the playground. Play is online. Play is what you do by yourself, on your phone. don't have the same reaction to machines. I think all the development work that we've done to allow machines to be that much more intuitive, to have the touch technology, to have it be much more simple and less machine-like, I think has gone a long way to changing that dynamic. And I think computers or computer technology can do so much for us. Individualized learning. I mean, there are so many incredibly powerful things that it can bring. So I think ensuring that there is a variety of different learning tools and playing environments, I think is incredibly powerful. And I think some of the extraordinary play that people have, for example, some of the very serious online gamers, people who know things like World of Warcraft, in order to get up to the top levels, you have to create these guilds of 50 people around the world who just, like us here, have never actually seen each other, in live. They've never seen beyond the avatar, and they work together to get to the next level, to come up with hypotheses, to try them out, and in a very scientific way, try and win the game and beat other guilds. So these are incredibly powerful medium spaces where people can be playing in very, very different ways. And I think there are a lot of very interesting and extraordinary ways that we're actually exploring more of our brains. I do think we need to become more human and better at being human, and not be emulating the old machines, and particularly as AI is coming along. So I think being incredibly purposeful, intentional about what play means and how we're not allowing some of the challenges which did happen during the pandemic, where the generation that was sort of at the end of particularly the end of high school, the folks who are in the end of high school and in college, the social interactions that they did miss during that traumatizing time as well. People are seeing changes, some differences in the people who have sort of missed that group, many of that group who have had some not have as much social interaction as other people have done. So I think there are certainly things we need to be very, very thoughtful about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful conversation, guys, for sure. It is, we can go on, and we're more than happy to do that. If we want to take a picture, Dave, to wrap up for those that have a sharp 1:30 or Eastern time, do we want to do that?
Yeah, other than Carrie, are you good? Could you be brief, or did you have deep thoughts?
I can be really brief. I just wanted to share. So I just wanted to share an example. I had a dispersed group of people around the country. I no longer manage them, but I took play back to the basics. So someone mentioned Tinker Toys earlier. I would schedule kind of quarterly, if I could, get-togethers, and I would mail everybody Lego sets. Or at Halloween, we did gingerbread Halloween gingerbread houses, and we got on Teams or Zoom, and we built our Legos and talked and dressed up in costumes and built our Halloween houses. And so I think that this idea of play is really important at a really engaged and close-knit team. And so I think that there are ways that even online and dispersed and away from each other, that you can be really playful and still be a leader and build Legos with your team. So just kind of a little different take on that.
Awesome. That's awesome. Dave, great idea. We're going to steal that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right.
Lego
I'd
sets.
love to grab a little photo. Chris Early, sit down and get back in your chair.
I'm going to pop the table out. Here we go. All right. Everybody's on their feet.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
With that, come on over here. We'll get a picture taken so that we can post that we were here. Prove it.
And Sophie and LA, if we could meet you in the front to do a little photo op, me, you, and Chris. That would
Yeah,
be
we'll
great.
do that after. We'll do.
Sorry, I
up
didn't
at
mean
the
to
front
walk
of the
through you.
reception
Sorry about that.
Yes. Sorry, didn't mean to walk through you. The new social awkwardness.
LA and I are holding hands again, Dave.
That happens in the metaverse.
Who's gonna
Sorry,
take pictures?
Dr. Parra, I'm not trying to like
Sorry, I'm so
Get-
close, Chris.
in your personal space. I have no idea what I'm doing. So
You're fine. I brushed
Is there
my
a way
teeth.
to smile?
I brushed my teeth this morning. So
We haven't
that's the
got
funny
there
thing,
yet.
everybody smile.
We're working on the smiling, but we do whatever. Most.
My goodness.
John, are you do you have a camera? Ramser? Yeah, mute. All right. Do you need us to wave or do anything, or you want to just take one?
Hey.
Can you give us a 3, 2, 1?